Neil from Essex here to talk to you today about buying a tractor in 2023. The world has been turned upside down in a lot of ways here lately. There's some good things and bad things that we have to share here today. So come along with me. We're going to take a walk around outside here a little bit and talk about what it might look like if you're planning on buying a piece of machinery this year.
Essex, a helping hand with your land.
So we'll start by getting the bad news out of the way first, right? We'll talk about the happy stuff later. The biggest disruption that we see in the market right now is at the low end of things. The consumer products, things like consumer zero-turn mowers and lawn tractors. Many of our suppliers sitting here nearly in April have yet to give us our deliveries for this season. We haven't received most of the little lawn tractors or the zero-turn mowers and that stuff that we sell. The ones that are coming in, we're hearing of severe supply problems. Some companies are only giving us 20 or 30% of what our normal orders would be because availability of engines, those small gas engines, specifically the ones from Briggs & Stratton and Kohler, are absolutely terrible. We do see better availability from Kawasaki. Kawasaki does tend to have engines though that are more in the upper class of equipment, right? More the prosumer type stuff when you're getting into a little bit better quality machines. So things like Kubota's 400 series or some of the mid-range Ferrises, we have a little bit more availability of because they sport those Kawasaki engines. If you look at these companies overall, they really have limited production capabilities at this point, and if you're in their shoes, you want to build some of those mid-range mowers anyway, right? You're going to cut out your low-end stuff where the margins may not be as good, and the limited production capacity that you do have is going to go towards those mid-range models where you might be making a little bit more money, selling a little bit more high-priced piece of equipment. So that low end of consumer products is absolutely wiped out this season. Cannot believe how bad the inventory side of things looks, but if you start to move up into the market a little bit, you're buying a little bit better quality piece of equipment, you might find some machinery out there. We've talked before about some of the shortages that we're seeing in equipment driven by parts supply issues. Mostly things like hydraulic cylinders, tires, injection molded plastics, all those components that go into making a finished product. If you look at a lot of our vendors' product lines, at the end of that line right now, they're often having a lot of finished products sitting, waiting for that one last item to come in and finish things, and that is continuing. For that reason, we're often seeing availability of certain products showing up in slugs, right? You might have 2,000 of something sitting at the end of the product line, but once those tires show up, all 2,000 of those go out to the dealerships and show up. So availability for us has been really hard to project out because we might have a several week or month period where we're not getting shipments of a particular item, but all of a sudden 2 or 3 months worth of shipments show up at one time. So it's not all bad news across the board. We definitely would see differences between companies depending on how they source and construct their products. Companies that say in-source a lot more, that build more of their own machines, build them domestically, build them from their own parts, are having a lot less trouble than those that might be sourcing a lot of things from abroad or reliant a lot upon third-party suppliers to build their parts or even complete machines sometimes, right? This New Holland stuff sitting around me here is a great example of that. It's built at a factory that's only a half an hour away from us. It's built from parts that they largely produce themselves in-house. And so we've seen a lot less problems from this kind of equipment than we would have from, say, machines that might be from third-party suppliers and brought in from overseas. The paper that I'm carrying around here is actually our company balance sheet. And there's some impressive numbers behind the state of our New Holland inventory right now, if we can put a positive spin on something. If we go back and compare our inventory level on March of 2019, then look at the inventory level today at March of 2022, our inventory level here at Mount Joy is exactly the same as what it was 2 years ago, just leading into the pandemic. And if you look at us corporately overall and include our satellite stores into that equation as well, our inventory level for New Holland equipment right now is the best that it's been in the last 2 years. See behind me here, there's more equipment coming in. If we look for one positive out of all that's been happening this year, it's that more equipment is rolling into our lots on a really regular basis all the time. If we look at the size of the backlog, the amount of months and the number of people that have been waiting for equipment, that timeline is shortening all the time. So if you're getting in line today to wait for a piece of machinery, that line is probably shorter than what it was a couple months ago. You don't have to look too hard around the economy to find places where prices are increasing and changing rapidly. There's good and bad things that we can point out right now when it comes to equipment pricing. If we pick out the good things, it's that certain amount of price increases have stopped. Early on here, months ago, it seemed like our inboxes were filled with emails from vendors every other day with the price of steel going up. Steel surcharges pushing up the price of that equipment in pretty significant ways. Those have pretty much stopped at this point, but we are now still seeing some increases coming out just to offset the inflation that's happening in the economy, increased pricing from trucking and labor costs. However, I would say that the increases that we're seeing at this point are much smaller than the ones that we were seeing when the raw material prices were really moving fast. We continue to work through the numbers here on the company balance sheet. Another one that pops out at me here is used equipment inventories. Right now we're sitting on about 60% less used equipment in inventory than what would have been typical a year or two ago. That means the selection of what's out there is very limited. Now that doesn't mean that you're not going to find a piece of equipment. What is definitely happening right now is that the turns of this machinery is extremely quick because of the limited inventory that's sitting on the ground. Once we get a new piece in, you are all sitting watching the recent trade-ins link on our website and picking up those machines almost immediately. It's amazing how fast that stuff sells. So inventories are very low, but from our seat, the availability has actually been not too terribly bad. But we're just seeing these turns happening so quickly, and the equipment goes out the door as fast as what it comes in. You can continue that trend across a lot of other things here. Implements are also in very much the same boat. Our implement inventories overall are down to a little bit stable, but that same thing happens. As soon as that truck pulls into the store, hits the loading dock, 50-60% of what's on that truck comes off and is just immediately set aside because it's got somebody's name on it. So the volumes are there, the sales are still happening. Just the machinery already has names on it and goes out the door quickly than what we would have ever imagined possible. Another positive note to share is that parts availability has remained pretty good. If you look at the overall dollars of parts sitting on our shelves, they're at the highest level that they've already been at. So things like all the stuff that it takes to keep your equipment out in the field have been readily available. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not pain points out there. I know things like wheel motors and stuff for skid loaders I've heard is a frequent issue. A lot of people tend to run those things for thousands and thousands of hours, and we've had some machine down situations that have been difficult to get back up again and running, and those are important machines to keep out in the field. So we're attuned to the problem areas that there are. We try to hold back inventory and stuff to be able to support people locally here where we can, but by and large we've been really encouraged that the breadth of the parts that we rely upon have remained readily available. So if we summarize all of those things up, as far as availability goes, pretty pessimistic on the consumer products at the bottom of the market, but things that are made domestically, implement availability, tractor availability, all does seem to be improving just a little bit. We're having a little bit more inventory on the ground, and the wait time for that equipment has shortened. Now, we are sitting here on probably about April 1st, about the time that you're going to be watching this video. We are going into the busiest time of year for us, and I suspect you're going to see those wait times ratchet back up here quickly again as we go into that peak season. The one advice that you could give for the beginning of this thing, for the beginning of the pandemic, is work ahead early. Don't wait to walk into the store when your grass is a foot high or your cows need to be fed. Think months ahead of time and plan out your needs so that we can go through and try to make sure that you have what you need when you need it, because there are significant lead times to this stuff. Be patient with us. I'll tell you, I really feel sympathetic for our sales staff, for everybody that works in the background to try to get the equipment out the door to you, because our jobs have never been harder. Every transaction that we do takes 3 times as long as what it used to because of the amount of follow-up work we're needing to do, the amount of effort that it takes to communicate with all of you and keep you in the loop for where your equipment is. It has been a challenging job down here to have lately because of all the different things that are happening out there. If you have the ability to, the best thing that you could do, even if you're looking at a need a year from now, is to call in, get a quote, and get yourself into the computer system. Some companies are protecting pricing that we give out, while some are being a little bit more relaxed and not being as forward about what the pricing might be a year from now when the machinery actually starts to arrive again. So it's always going to be in your best interest to work ahead and get yourself in that computer system because it may protect you from some of the unknowns that might come up in the future. It can only help. There's no case that I've ever seen where it's hurted by getting in early and working ahead. So we're here to help you navigate all of this stuff. If you're shopping for a piece of equipment, it is our jobs to help. It's what we do. We've got a great staff of people back here doing it. An amazing parts department to back up all the equipment that you've already got, and a deep bench of service technicians with a lot of experience in order to fix your most complicated repairs. You can give us a call at Messick's. We're available at 800-222-3373 or online at Messick's.com.